Hello and welcome back to FatbossTV. Today we're having a look at another 5-man dungeon that's been released on the Legion Alpha, which is Eye of Azshara.
Yes, this is a 5-boss dungeon which takes place in the open air area in Azsuna. And we're here to fight back the Queen Azsharas Naga forces who are pretty much causing problems for the Alliance and Horde in the zone of Azsuna. We're not entirely sure yet because that zone isn't available. We're pretty sure it's going to tie in the storyline, and either way the Nagas are being bastards, so we're here to take them out.
Now, the route in which you take in this dungeon is entirely up to you. There's actually loads of different ways you can go, but you have to kill all 4 bosses before you gain access to the last one. Now, when you first enter the dungeon, you have to fight your way through several camps of Naga forces. Now, this trash isn't really that punishing. You have some caster Nagas that you need to interrupt, otherwise they just do a load of AoE damage, as well as some hunter-like Naga mobs that will enrage nearby wildlife, causing them to come and fight for them. So you'll get like turtles coming over and snails and all sorts of random mobs that come over. They're really, really easy to deal with. It's just more things to kill, so it's just irritating more than anything else. And to be fair, this whole trash really is just tank and spank.
Yeah, exactly. There isn't really too much there to cause you problems. However, you can come across some really big Naga crushers that will do a lot more tank damage, as well as having some sort of frontal shockwave that can stun you, and they look fucking cool as hell.
They do look cool, yeah.
They look like more reptilian than usual, but they do need to be focused down because, as I said, they are doing more tank damage than usual, so make sure you do take them out. Now, after you clear through all that trash, you make your way to the first boss area, and here in this arena-style area is Warlord Pardesh. Now, he'll be applying dots to random players throughout the fight with an ability called Throw Spear. You just need to heal it up. It isn't too much for you to deal with. However, one of his main things he'll be doing is calling reinforcements, and this will summon one of 2 adds to come and help him. Both of these adds are very similar to the trash. Pretty much just pick them up, interrupt them because they have some, like, a little bit of annoying abilities, and that way you can keep them in melee range so you can position them correctly and start cleaving them off of the boss. However, it's better that you actually let the boss kill the ad.
So at 100% energy, he will charge towards the tank and then mark somebody. After a couple of seconds, he will then throw a spear at them. However, this spear is in fact a projectile and you can block it. And you can use the ad to block it. If the ad does get hit by this spear, they take a huge amount of ticking damage, and they also become stunned and take 100% increased damage for around 10 seconds. However, we found that simply the ad taking the spear was pretty much enough to just kill it off.
Yeah, if you had like 1 dot on it, that dot will suddenly tick for a ton and the ad would die. So pretty much instead of fighting all of the ads, just make sure you hide behind them when the spear comes in. It's kind of like Mark for Death on Blackhand in Blackrock Foundry. So you get Mark for Death, instead of hiding behind a siege breaker, you hide behind one of the ads, and the ad goes flying away, and it's fucking hilarious, and it is really, really good. If you do get caught out by the spear, though, it does do a fairly high amount of ticking damage to you, so you do have to be pretty careful with that. So if an ad does die, maybe have your tank take it instead, or healers just be ready to heal that player up because they are going to take quite a lot of damage.
And then at 30%, the boss does gain an enrage. This simply just increases his haste by 30%, and this also seemed to make him cast his abilities more often, but you can still deal with them the same way. Nothing really changes, but that's that encounter. There's nothing more to it.
Now, after finishing him off, we had a choice to go towards the shore or towards like a wooded area, and we of course went towards the shoreline. Now, in order to get to the seaside, you need to go through some horrible cove. In this cove, the trash really takes it up a notch in terms of the damage they deal. You'll come across these great sea giant wave crushers. These will periodically stun the group, and each time they do, they'll gain a damage dealt increase. So focusing these guys down is very important before they just start destroying your group just with this unavoidable stun that they do. You'll also come across packs of goblin slaves. These guys apply a ton of different poison effects that will slow you, they'll reduce your haste, and apply dots to you, which are pretty nasty. And at the same time, you can get roaming packs of murlocs that will just run at you at high speed. These guys will apply a debuff to the tank that increases their damage taken by 10% per stack, and it can stack up really, really high. So pulling anything with these packs of murlocs can be pretty sketchy for your tank, especially if they run at you while you've got some horrible dots from all of these goblin slaves, but you can deal with it. These are kind of like non-elite mobs. They still have a fair amount of health, and as I said, they do a ton of fucking damage.
Now, as you exit the other side of the cove, you need to take out another wave crusher, and then you finally get to see the shoreline, which is completely covered in shipwrecks and coated in packs of murlocs, as well as groups of goblin slaves and even more sea giants. You'll actually find a new type of sea giant here, the Tide Stomper. These just create several pools to spawn around them as you're fighting them, and when you're hit by them, you get knocked up and take damage. These circles do take a while to explode though, so it's pretty easy to deal with.
However, as you move towards the next boss location, you come across both types of sea giant at the same time. So you can be stunned while trying to move from the swirly circles. And it can get a little bit scary. However, the stun isn't very long. You do have time to move. We just found that taking out the Crusher first is super important because, of course, he is ramping up his damage anyway. And it made it a hell of a lot easier to kill the Tide Stomper afterwards. So that's what we did. Now, after you take both of them out, you come to the next boss, which is King Deepbeard. And he's an even bigger sea giant with a shipwreck for a shoulder plate piece.
Yeah, he looks cool as shit.
He's so cool. He's a very, very cool looking boss.
So out of all the bosses in here, this guy was probably the deadliest and did the most damage, and also is probably most punishing towards your tank. He has something called Ground Slam, which is just a very large cast where he'll slam his fist down on the location of the tank, which just deals a crazy amount of damage to anyone within 15 yards of that location. The idea is, as soon as the cast starts, the tank just sidesteps out of that location, and then that way no one takes any damage whatsoever. He also does a Quake where he deals damage to the entire group. This happens instantly, there's virtually no cast whatsoever. It just deals damage to everyone, but it also does splash damage, so you need to make sure you're spread 5 yards. But you do have a lot of room, so being spread isn't too difficult. Now, the most important ability the boss does is something called Gaseous Bubbles. This is a 15-second debuff that is applied to a couple of players. Now, all this debuff is simply pretty much a disc shield. It makes you absorb damage for the next 15 seconds. However, after those 15 seconds and when the debuff times out, you explode and do a stupid amount of damage to the entire group. So what you need to do is take damage to remove that shield within the 15 seconds so you don't explode. Now, the best way to do that is something called Call of the Seas. The boss just spawns a bunch of circles. These just randomly rotate around the room, and they sometimes overlap, which is really, really nice. If you stand inside these circles, you take a bit of ticking damage, and this is probably the best way, as well as Quake, in order to remove your debuff. However, the damage from the circles alone, if you're only stood in one, over that 15-second period is probably not actually long enough to remove your debuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you need to be able to stand in two at some point. You kind of had to guess, okay, do you think these two things are going to group up? Because they kind of just change directions whenever the fuck they like. So you've got to try and do your best to try and, like, see when they are going to group up together. And especially if the Call of the Seas doesn't come in until quite a while after the Gaseous Bubbles debuff, which happened a couple of times. It's super hard to take enough damage to break this thing. So either the Call of the Seas isn't doing enough damage, or the Gaseous debuff shield is just far too strong.
Or the timing's off.
All the timing's off a little bit. Because the thing is, after the explosion of the shield, you normally get a Quake straight away afterwards, and you just die.
Yeah, we had someone get one shot.
You just can't really do much about it. So it's super important that you do break these disc shields as soon as you possibly can. And as long as you can do that, the boss is pretty easy to deal with. Once he hits 30%, he gets 100% attack speed increase, so he starts wailing on your tank a little bit. It doesn't increase the rate in which he puts out his abilities, but yeah, the tank starts getting hit a lot, so make sure you have some cooldowns available for when that happens.
Now, after you kill him off, you can jump down into the area to reach the boss that is right at the back of the instance, which is the third boss, well, at least for us it was the third boss. Now, making your way over towards him, you do need to kill some trash, mainly which consists of hydras that just do big lightning shockwaves, and crab people that deal some big damage to the tank, but it can be split by all stacking up in front of it. It's like a split AoE cone thing, so you just stack up and the tank takes virtually no damage whatsoever. And there's also packs of crabs that just slow your tank, which is
pretty irritating.
Annoying more than anything else.
Now, during this time, you will find yourself being pushed around periodically by the wind. This will occur throughout the rest of this area in the dungeon, which is pretty much the next 3 bosses. And to be honest, it's just more of a pain in the ass than anything else. Like, you can run against it, it's not too bad. And yeah, it
just exists.
Yeah, it just exists.
It's just randomly there's wind and then suddenly it goes away and then it comes back again. And it makes dodging certain things, mainly things on the last boss, which we'll talk about when we actually get to him. But yeah, the wind exists, it pushes you around and it's annoying.
Now, after clearing out this whole rock pool area, we then engage the next boss, which is Serpentrix, and it's pretty much a green Megara head. An ability that the boss will constantly be spitting out is something called Poison Spit. This will just lob poison at the location of players. It's just little swirly circles, you've got to move out of them. However, there's supposed to be some sort of interaction with this and the wind, with this mechanic making it so the poison bolts will travel faster or slower depending on the direction of the wind. However, the wind was really inconsistent and we never really saw it happen. I assume on live you might be able to make it so if you're upwind of the boss, then it will travel slower towards you. but it was never really an issue to move out of in the
There's no
first
sort
place.
of animation to indicate where the wind's going, apart from which direction your character's being pushed in as well.
Yeah.
So it's not all that clear.
The boss will also put a debuff on players called Toxic Wound. This will just cause them to spawn a bunch of permanent goo underneath them for around 5 seconds or so. If you have this debuff, you do need to keep moving, as the goo patches keep spawning throughout the debuff, and they can stack up and they can do quite a high amount of ticking damage if they're all on top of each other. So if you get the debuff, make sure you move away.
And the boss submerges at 66% and 33%, and just reappear somewhere else around the encounter area. Now, if nobody goes into melee range of the boss, like immediately, he'll just start sending out even more poison bolts at a very, very high speed. So, fortunately, we have a tank that charged, so we could get in melee range almost instantly. At the same time that he submerges, 2 new adds will spawn out of nearby pools, and they will just spam something called Blazing Nova. This is an interruptible cast that just deals damage to the entire group. The damage that it deals is pretty minor, and these adds don't have too much health, but if you left them up forever and just allowed them to constantly spam cast, your healer would probably have an issue. So the best thing for you guys to do as soon as you do go into this submerge phase is just have all your DPS switch to the new adds that spawned and just have your tanks sit on the boss. And that is actually the encounter, there's not much more to it. So after we killed the snake, we then moved towards the 4th boss. However, you can't engage the boss immediately. You do need to kill some of these hate core arcanists that are providing shield stir. Once you kill 2 of them off, you can then go and actually start the encounter.
Now, these Naga aren't too difficult to deal with. They will just cause several patches of, like, shit to spawn, and there's lightning strikes and all that kind of stuff. But most importantly, like, the most important thing in this entire dungeon, actually, they'll cast polymorph fish, and it makes you flop about like a fish. You can dispel it and everything, but
we had
you
an
don't
idea.
want to dispel it.
We had a really good idea with these, because every time we got polymorph fish, we was on land.
Yeah.
And we was like, what happens if you get polymorph fish in the water? Can you control the fish and move it around? No, you can't.
No, it's a shame.
Fuck you, Blizzard. You ruined it.
But either way, polymorph fish, best ability in the entire world. Now, as you search for these arcanists, you will actually come across these little globule adds. These globules don't do much, but when they do die, they will slow anyone nearby by 20%, and this does stack up. So you can actually be slowed by 100% if you kill all 5 at once, which does suck quite a lot when you're trying to move around this really, really large area. Now, after you do take out these 2 arcanists, you can engage the next boss, which is a Lady Hate Coil.
Now, this encounter takes place within like a shallow pool of water with several sand mounds scattered throughout. If you leave this area, you take very, very high damage, so you have to fight the boss within this area. Now, this boss makes use of these mounds and this environment in which you're fighting in for an ability called Static Nova. This just electrifies all the water nearby, which will stun any players stood inside the water and also deal a massive amount of damage to them. So when this ability comes in, you simply just jump on one of the sand mounds, and that way you don't get stunned and you don't take any damage. However, you can't always stand on top of one of these sand mounds because of an ability called Focus Lightning.
Now, she will debuff all players, and after a few seconds, lightning will strike their location, dealing damage to them. Now, this is supposed to destroy all the sand mounds that they're standing on as well. So the idea would be, get on the sand for the Static Nova, and then get back in the water for the Focus Lightning. However, the Focus Lightning didn't actually destroy the sand mounds. Instead, they would just be randomly hit by other lightning from no ability, and it'll just despawn them. This will sometimes happen at random times. One time it happened just as a Static Nova cast was going off, and we all got stunned because it destroyed the sand mound that was going to try and go on. So it doesn't seem to be working 100% correctly just yet. She will also spawn a set of globules that you were fighting on the trash. You do need to cleave these guys down, but you want to be careful about the movement speed decrease they leave on you, because you might struggle to get onto a sand mound if you're not nearby, so do take that into account.
Another ability that she also has is Curse of the Witch. Now, this curse is applied to seemingly a random amount of players. Sometimes it would be on one of us, other times it would be on all of us. We're not quite sure how that works, but the idea of the curse is that it does nothing while you have it, but when it actually runs out, you just shoot a barrage of arcane energy in front of you that deals damage to anyone that's in front of you, as well as dealing damage potentially to the boss and the adds. This ability didn't work at all.
Yeah, it didn't really seem to do anything. Either there's no animation or it deals no damage, so when it went off, it kind of didn't do anything. We were worried anyway, so we turned away. But it seemed really pointless. I just had the boss hitting me in the back. So once again, this boss, although it has some really, really cool ideas, it seems just to be a little bit buggy. This is like the first day it's been released, so of course things won't work 100% sure, and I'm sure it'll be fixed. But it's a very cool idea for a boss nonetheless. Now, after finishing off the last of the 4 bosses, whatever order you decided to do them, the last boss, which has previously been encased in some giant arcane shield, will now appear. Now, in order to fight this Immersius lookalike, you will need to take out the 4 binders that are casting a ritual on it. This trash has the same abilities as the previous trash mainly, but it also does have an ability called Arcane Orb, that will actually appear in the boss fight. Arcane Orb is a debuff that will cause an orb to spawn above a player and slowly fall on them, kind of chasing them around as they move about. If you dispel the debuff, it will stop the orb from following the player around. It'll make the orb fall in a set location instead, so this just allows the player to move out of it instead of getting hit, which does deal damage to them, but more importantly, it stuns them for 6 seconds. So
yeah.
Debuff, dispel it, move out of the circle on the floor is all you need to do.
So after you've taken out all the 4 binders and you've dealt with the new Arcane Orb, it's now actually time to start the fight. It's time to take on Wrath of Azshara. And if you look very, very closely, you'll actually see one of Azshara's loyal handmaidens stuck inside him. Looks a bit weird.
Yeah, it's a bit gross. But either way, it's a very interesting boss fight. One of his main mechanics that he'll do for the tanks is something called Massive Deluge. This will place a big AoE underneath the tank that will explode after a couple of seconds and knock them away. It is very important that you don't get hit, because if no one's in melee range of the boss, it will just spam AoE on the group and it'll just deal more and more and more damage. And even if there is a melee DPS there, they'll just get slapped in the face instead. So it's probably important that as a tank, you don't get knocked on the other side of the fucking room.
The boss will also constantly spawn Mystic Tornadoes. These tornadoes just slowly move around, and if you're caught by them, you get knocked up in the air and you take some damage. The thing is with these tornadoes is that they move extremely slowly, and you can very, very easily see where they're spawning, as it's shown by like some dust clouds forming on the ground. If you just move away from them, don't stand anywhere near them, you will never get hit by them. They are that slow.
And on top of this, you do have the Arcane Bomb, which is the same as the trash. Once again, dispel it and move away from the big orb falling from the sky. Now, throughout this time, the boss is actually spawning slow-moving waves that will deal a small amount of damage to anyone caught with them. He'll also cause lightning strikes to hit the ground, which are shown by little swirly circles. These don't hit very hard, but you still don't want to stand in them all day. But you also have the wind pushing you around slightly every now and then. So once again, it's just a bit irritating. However, when the boss reaches 10% HP, all of these weather effects, so the waves, the lightning strikes, and the wind, will become a lot more frequently. Towards the end of the encounter, there's so much stuff coming at you, and it looks absolutely amazing. You're getting pushed about by the winds, there's loads of tornadoes, there's loads of lightning strikes, there's loads of waves. None of it does any fucking damage.
Yeah, you can literally stand in every single one of the abilities, including the Arcane Orb, and it does nothing.
Yeah, you'll probably be fine.
So this fight, although it looks amazing, it's actually really easy right now. I mean, it just needs to be tuned slightly. And also there's a problem with the waves. Like, if you get hit by a wave, you can just stand in it forever.
Yeah.
It, like, doesn't re-tick. So
yeah, it'd be good, I think, if the waves maybe like picked you up and dragged you a little bit, kind of like how it did on Alakir with the tornadoes. Maybe that'll be like quite a good mechanic. But you got to remember, it is normal mode. I did have a look at the heroic mode dungeon journal for this fight, and on heroic, every single time you take damage from a weather effect, it will increase the amount of damage you take from subsequent weather effects from there on out. So it does get harder.
Yeah, so there is some sort of punishment for being bad. Yeah.
But on normal mode, still, like in comparison to some of the other normal modes we did, although this place looks absolutely amazing, and loads of the bosses, they're very, very cool. It did feel very, very undertuned.
Apart from the second boss.
Apart from the second boss, it just hit way too fucking hard. But yeah, I absolutely love the instance. I thought it was very, very cool. It's just a little long, I'd say.
It's a large instance. It has 5 bosses, and you need to kill certain trash in order to unlock certain bosses. But because it is such a large instance, and I mean, there is so much trash, I like the way that Blizzard have designed it, because you can easily, like on the second run through, we did the instance, we managed to dodge so much trash, which probably half the time we were in there in comparison to the first time. And obviously we're going slowly anyway, we're trying to get everything in. But yeah, I definitely agree with you. The instance is maybe a little too long. And of course, the bosses feel slightly undertuned. So it's, you know, that sort of takes a bit of the excitement away from it. But it's still a good instance.
One thing I did actually really like about it is how they implemented the different areas. Because it's quite easy just to kind of lob you in a green dungeon. It's like, yeah, fight the green plants. But this one, you kind of went to the shoreline, and then you had to go into a wooded area to take out the arcane people that were protecting Lady Hate Coil or whatever her name was. And you got to go into that rock pool area and clean out that place. And then you fight in this giant whirlpool area in the middle. I think it's got nice, distinct, different areas. Yeah. And it does feel nice going from place to place, even though the whole area does feel really gloomy because it's raining the whole time.
Yeah, one thing I will say, actually, which sort of ties in with the rain, the whole wind effect thing, you know, where you're just randomly pushed back for so many seconds and then the wind goes away again. I really like that idea. I think that's really, really cool. But I think it could have a much bigger impact on what you're actually doing. On the last boss, it has a bit of an impact because, of course, you're trying to dodge so many things, and you can, if like, especially if you're taking risks to get that extra cast off. If you suddenly get pushed into it, you know, obviously that can be problematic. But I think the wind could be way stronger. Yeah. I don't think it should be so strong that you can't run against it and you can't actually move forward, I reckon it could be at least twice as strong. I think that'd make things way more interesting on certain boss fights.
Yeah, because most of the time you can literally just ignore it. And the thing is, in order to maybe make it less bad for caster DPS, maybe make it so the wind comes in less frequently, but when it does come in, it actually has an impact and you have to deal with it in some way. Because right now it comes in and you just kind of glide along with it. It's just, I don't give a fuck. Unless it's like a giant pool of lava or something, you don't care. You don't move. You just keep there and cast in who gives a toss. So hopefully they kind of like amp up the wind and of course fix the bosses a little bit. But once again, it's very, very early alpha. This is like the first day it's been released.
And the wind should affect the rain. When you're getting pushed by the wind, the rain comes down. The rain isn't going sideways either. It's just normal rain.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Fix it, Blizzard. That's the most important part of this dungeon. The rain.
The rain. Keep the bosses the same. It doesn't matter. Just fix the rain. Oh, dear.
But thank you very much for watching, guys. If you did enjoy this little preview, then please do drop us down a like. It helps us out a lot. And we shall see you in the next video.
Thank you for watching.
Thanks for watching.